connectionslab.org.
Well, thank you, George. I appreciate being on here. I've been listening to some of the podcasts. I love the conversation about framing, about how do we shift the mental models of the way that we see and understand our worldview. Mm-hmm. How do we see and understand other worldviews and the connections that we have between those? There's so much that we don't know about others and the experiences and the life direction that they have gone, especially those who differ from us wildly, that it's difficult for us to understand those perspectives. And so being able to frame and change the dialogue and the conversation through more dialogue and back and forth. I'm looking not for safe spaces here. I'm looking for brave spaces here. We're here to shift narratives. We're here to shift conversations. We're here to move forward. Yeah. So, as you said, yeah, I'm Justice Renée. I use she, her pronouns. Have a little bit of a crazy background, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, I think it's just one of those things. Yes. I use my background according to the states that I've lived in. I've lived all over the United States, but I was born and raised in Utah. I was not Mormon. I was a fundamentalist evangelical. I was part of, my father led the creation science movement. So held conferences of anywhere between 3,000 to 5,000 people, telling them and telling kids that the earth was only 6,000 years old. Mm. We brought in Ken Ham, we brought in the Morrises, Dwayne Gish. Hell, I sold a bunch of books for Ken Ham when I was 10 years old. He gave me the board game he made I then played that with Dwayne Gish. That's a lot of internal baseball if you don't know anything about the creation science movement. But,
and is that the Gish of the Gish Gallop?
Yes, that is. Yeah, that's Dwayne Gish. Dwayne Gish is the Gish Gallop.
For those who don't know, the Gish Gallop is a technique where you just keep talking and you don't shut up so that your opponent has absolutely no time to talk. Is that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. You keep asking so many questions that when a scientist who wants to directly refute and say, no, you're wrong in this point, you've now gone 20 more questions into the list, leaving that person addressing one point, the audience believing that you're not willing and ready to address the last 19. And thus the narrative and the shaping and the framing of the conversation has been set that the scientist doesn't actually know what he's talking about. So born and raised in Utah, that's where I got my evangelical streak. That is where I got into ministry. That is where I also got my martyrdom complex for a lot of reasons. When you're when you're the only evangelical in a town of, I think it was 980, and we were the only evangelical family among a sea of Mormons, we began to assume and take on a lot of posturing around the whole martyrdom complex. Yeah. So after...
that all sounds like tremendous fun.
I got into ministry at the age of 13. I preached my first sermon at the age of 14, and then went on into ministry and moved. So I was born and raised in Utah, and I moved to Wyoming and went to Frontier School of the Bible out there in Wyoming. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Biblical Studies out there. Got connected into my faith, learned everything about apologetics, how to challenge people, how to stand strong on my belief in the one true God, the belief that I knew what was absolutely true. Got connected in with a lot of different people, specifically my father was a militia member. My father was involved in a lot of political activism in Utah at the time as well. And so going into Wyoming, I started to get involved as well. And that was my first vote was for George Bush at the time.
Okay. Well, everybody comes around.
Yeah, it's a thing. Got married and then moved and started my pastoring in Nebraska. So I was a youth pastor, camp director, associate camp director, did a lot of ministry, did a lot of stuff for different congregations out there in Nebraska. We even worked with a group home and everything along those lines, and was working to move to Indonesia and to Thailand as a missionary. I'd been working towards Indonesia and writing letters back and forth with missionaries out in Indonesia since I was 14.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was something that was really big and deep into my soul. It was who I was. I was an evangelical. I was deep in my faith. I believed it 100%. It was everything to my T. And I was going out to the mission field, and that was my plan. I went to an orientation with a mission agency called Cross World. And at the time, they turned around and said, we see that there's something off with you. And so we think you need to go back and spend some time. We didn't understand why. We had all these reasons under the sun of why they might have said that. We could rationalize the reasons, but part of it is why I'm here. This is who I am. My transness comes through in every aspect of my life and has since I was a little kid. And it's just a part of life. Left Nebraska and went to and started my computer career because I was going to try and take care of my family. Before I started my computer career, I was making my first 2 years married. I made no more than $5,000 a year. I hauled pipe. I planted out on farms. I hauled dead haul. So I would go around to all the pig farms in between down south of LaGrange, Wyoming, so around Cheyenne, Wyoming, and would pick up all the dead pigs, throw them in my pickup, and then haul them off to, because they were, by that time, they were bad because they'd been in the sun and everything. They had died, and so we went and out that. I did a lot of jobs and everything along those lines, but even during that time, like I was the total amount of income that I was making, because I was putting everything into ministry, everything into going into ministry, for the first 2 years of our marriage was $5,000 to $6,000 the next year. And then the first 5 years of my marriage, I didn't make over $15,000 a year. So talking about poverty, living, I lived in my car for a while, all the fun jazz. Yeah. You got to do this stuff. Got into computers because someone told me that I might be good with them. And apparently I am, because I'm still doing them. And moved to Idaho in 2007 to work for Dell at the time as a server engineer. And that's when I finally started getting really good with computers and got connected with them. At the same time, this is 2007, 2008, we had the crash. And my background, I jumped all over it. I was angry. I was frustrated. I was upset. I got connected in with Ron Paul and Ron Paul's movement. And then after a bunch of connections with Glenn Beck, I created Tears of the Patriots out in Wyoming, which was a Tea Party movement out in Twin Falls, Idaho. It's long gone, thankfully. But I kept that going and running. And we're going to talk about this when we get to how do our views shift and evolve. Yeah. But there was a really important person out there that I connected with that helped me start to shift my paradigm, because he changed the framing of the way I saw the reality that I was confronted with.
What did he say to you? Whoever it was.
Well, the thing is, he just showed me kindness. He showed me kindness. So he was a pagan. He believed very much in Thor and held very deeply to his pagan roots. But he was the most Christian of the Christians I'd worked with. At this time, on my side, when I was working with the Tea Party movement, we were doing things to defraud the government around taxes because we didn't want to pay taxes. We were moving people into specific precinct zones to take over the precinct captain. So we would literally take people, move them for the specific allotted period of time into a county, flip the county, and then figure out how to flip a different county. And we had all the strategy. It's kind of interesting because I look back at my past. My father laid out a lot of conversations with me, and I was listening in the rooms while they were talking about a lot of these political things that they were doing. And then when I got into politics, I started implementing some of those same things and working very closely with a lot of the Tea Party members who were doing a lot of the same thing. And then when Trump hit and Project Blitz got announced, I was like, holy crap, that's all the shit we were doing. And that's the thing that I've noticed when it comes to a lot of the political dialogues and political strategies. Republicans have been doing these strategies and planning these strategies for decades. My father, you can look back in the books and everything along those lines, you can see the startings of the stuff in the 70s really gets going after Ronald Reagan hits. Towards the end, you get the stuff around, I apologize, my mind's all confuddled right now, which is normal.
It's great.
And then you start to see it just amplify in the 90s. And then you see the foundations really take root with the Tea Party movement. And then we see how the foundational steps move forward with Trump. And now we have what we have now across the states with the power grabs and the power controls. It's a whole situation. It's never been just one thing. Anyways, my narrative shifted because what they did is they challenged me. They showed me kindness, connection, and humanity to me in a way that I hadn't seen, and challenged my perspective on what was true. And so I had read the Bhagavad Gita, I had read the Quran, and so I knew all of the apologetics to counteract them. And I knew
could you explain what
epistemology.
Apologetics is?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Apologetics is basically a way of, it's a form of defending your faith. It's basically, you believe this, and thus we're going to counter. We're going to put a whole bunch of things that will back up what we believe, because we've already come to the conclusion, we've already come to the premise of what we believe, and we're going to now backload it with all the evidence that we believe to make sure that is a solid claim. Apologetics is very well taught all over seminary and everything along those lines for how do you back up the Bible and everything like that. I knew all the apologetics, but I had never applied it to myself. And so I, at the time, was challenged by Dave, sorry. A little bit of a bug there. I was challenged by Dave to question my own beliefs. And so I did exactly that. I went and I approached it the exact same way. So if the Bible was true, then it should be able to withstand all the same scrutiny of everything else. Moved to Oklahoma due to a lot of reasons. In Oklahoma is where I lost my faith. And then I found my humanity here in Minnesota. And so that's what finds me to, that's my story. I guess it goes through all the states. We went a little bit longer than I wanted to. I usually have that a lot shorter.
That's all right. That's great. So I'm really curious about that moment, the things that were going on when you were challenged, because I know it's very difficult for anyone to challenge what they already believe.
Yeah.
You know, I go for a long time thinking I know what I'm talking about. And then somebody says something, I'm going, God, what a dope. But I'm really glad I learned that, because who wants to be a dope, right? But, you know, so around that time, there's the rational things or the way you worked it out. There's also emotional things. What was around that moment? That's just fascinating to me.
So this is what I found. It is not a single argument that changes and shifts people's minds. It is not a pervasive conversation. It is consistent, reliable questions that honor humanity within the individual, that allows them to shift their narrative and their perspective. That can come from a lot of things. It can come from someone who shows you love and kindness. It can also come from an arrogant asshole on the side of the street yelling, right? It's not just one thing. Dave only had one real interaction with me, the times that I was in Idaho, right? He challenged me, but he let it go at that. It took me 8 years after Dave's initial challenging to finally say, you know what? I can no longer hold my beliefs the way that I have them. I have to let them go, because either everything about this world is a lie and my truth is real, or maybe I need to be a little bit more open to what can be found in this amazing world.
So it took a while. You know, similar story. Julie Ethan, who started the Connections Lab with me back in 2000, I don't remember. And she had the same thing. She had started out very almost cloistered Christian family, and a friend challenged her on refugees. In fact, those of you taking the workshop, I use that example that the Republicans have a crime frame around immigration, and this is really a refugee crisis. And she said that she didn't change her mind just then, but that was, she didn't want to use the word catalyst, but she said that was really one of the first times she challenged what she believed. So the whole notion of being able to challenge what you believe is something that it may be the kind of thing for us, for messaging, that is important. And I really like what you said about how when you're doing this, that you have to be kind and think about a person's humanity. And it sounds almost like you're challenging, but allowing that person the space to be able to come to that conclusion.
I think it's a mixture of it all, because this is the thing, is it's not just one approach that's going to change someone's mind, right? It's going to be many times the thing that is the paradigm shifter is someone that can reach into your lives and connect it. Like we talked about relational nodes, right? We know that we have sets of, each person's experience is unique. Each person's experience is their own. We live from that frame of reference. Our brains function in a way of being able to catalog and categorize and build relational connections to those objects based off of small hops between one thing. I can't go from red to blue instantaneously unless I do red is a color and blue is a color, right? I have to have a way of framing and connecting and joining the logic between those connections. When you're coming out of something that is as paradigm shifting and controlling as my worldview was, I mean, my friends, my family, everything was tied into my religious experience. So for me to give it up meant that I lost it all. And for me to even be willing to shift my mind or to question or open that meant that I had to shift it. And I know people in the political realm that is absolutely the case. If I go into some of the rural areas that I am a part of, they know very well, and we can talk about the nodes of rural versus urban, and I think we absolutely should. When you're dealing in these areas, a shift of saying, you know what, I actually hold to more democratic values than I do Republican values can sometimes mean life or death. And that might sound extreme, but when you understand the perspectives of loss of family, loss of relationship, loss of people that you're connected with, loss of any frame of what your morality is based off of, loss of all of those things. And I found that in political terms, you can have almost a religious connection to it in a way that you're not able to separate those values.
Mm-hmm. Got to be confusing as you're going through it,
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that hits into something, and I'm jumping a little bit, I apologize, right down here into the rural and metro.
Yeah, now this is, we have people in from the rural area here, we have people from the metro area. We've talked about this a number of times. In fact, Ron and Tom went with me down to, Tom Townsend went down to, what was
Winthrop?
it, Laverne? What was it, Lisa?
Winthrop, wasn't it?
Winthrop. And met with folks down there and trying to really get at this, what is it that makes the communication between rural and metro difficult? What is it? How do these people differ? And given that those differences exist, how do we bridge that, and where do we go? And so, you've already bridged this inside yourself and your family. And so, I don't know, talk to us about that.
Well, I think this
also
also
different cultures.
I think this also gets to Melody's question of how did you deal with your family and friends as you made shifts in your beliefs, right? Because we're not talking about when you're trying to change a belief. Even small beliefs have consequences. Even small understandings of the way the reality is has consequences on the way we see things. And it does shift the way your family and friends relate and interact and connect with you. So when we talk about the rural and the metro area, then you and I talked a bit about this. And I apologize, I'll try and draw something and show it up there in a line. So in rural areas, and I've traveled from Alaska all the way down to the lower 48, and I've worked in Wyoming, and I've worked in all of these areas. One of the things that I've dealt with is, so you have a node on a chart. And so I'm hoping that we can see it a little bit. There's a circle there. It's just a single node. Let's just say that is you. In a rural area, you're going to have a very small amount of people that you can possibly connect with. Let's say that you have 10 people, and I'll just draw just a couple dots on here to see it. And you're building your relationships and your connections with those individuals. These are weak ties. You might have something that's a close tie with a family member, with a cousin, with an uncle, connections in these relationships, maybe with the person you work with, your spouse, but you're also tying into your local community weak ties of people that you know you can relate with. In rural communities, it is very important to know that when you have an issue that occurs in any way whatsoever, that there will be someone that will step up and help you. We talk all the time about self-made people. That ain't the truth anywhere. And that has never been the truth in the rural areas. We talk about it, but at the end of the day, it is always about the people that will stop. If you're traveling the road from Alaska down on the lower 48, what you're going to always have is if you see someone on the side of the road, you stop and you help them every single time. Because if you don't, they might not stop for you. And those times you'll have like 6 hours between one car to another car. And so that can be a situation of life and death. When you're in rural communities and rural situations, dealing with water shortages, dealing with all sorts of issues out there, having people that have your back, having people that know what's in your cupboards is really, really, really important. So
and that's built into the culture.
That's built into the culture.
Over years and years and years, you may not even be aware of exactly why this is happening, but you were just living it as a lived experience.
It's a lived experience and lived connection. So you end up building these dots with these lines connecting into it of maybe just a couple people. And this is something we as a society do because we are community-driven individuals, every single one of us. The difference when you move from a rural setting where you might have a very small group of people that you are interacting with, very small nodes on a graph, and burning a single one of them might be making it really bad for you. If you are in a city area, you might have 100 nodes, 1,000 nodes. And so burning those nodes, for instance, why do I need to say hi to the person I just passed on the side of the street? Why do I need to stop and take care of the person that is struggling, right? Why do I need to help my neighbor out? Because if you burn that bridge, it's all right. You can find another bridge. Hell, you can hire a bridge. You have problems with your house, you can hire someone to come in and fix it. Where in many rural areas, the people that you're hiring are nodes in your graph because they're such a small thing.
Small community, so you see them all the time. So your interactions are necessary.
George?
You know very well.
We can't hear you very well. You got to either get closer to the computer or something.
Here.
Yeah.
Come on in.
I'll come in.
I ain't scared of you. We can get as close as we want. There we
go.
Hello.
So what was I saying? When you're in the connections you make in a rural area are necessarily repeated over and over, which is repetition. We know is what builds those connections between the nodes or brain cells, as we're always talking about. And so those are the people you see in multiple different situations.
Yeah.
It could be I'm just buying something at the grocery store. It could be, I got a flat and my spare's flat too, and I'm out in the middle of nowhere, or it could be anything. Mm-hmm. And so, whereas it's maybe different here because we are constantly in the metro area seeing different people. I have a community with our virus pod, which we still get together with. I have a community of musicians, those guys. Yep. But I have communities that are in politics with all you. And so the number of people is great. The time is divided. The connections are, as you say, the connections are weaker in a way.
It's easier for you to burn them. Right.
Easier to burn them.
Yeah. So what is the need to take care of? Know what's in their cabinets. Know how much food they have. Oh, they'll find something else. They have someone else that's in their lives. They have someone else that's connected because right? Mm-hmm. You don't, when you have such a few amount of nodes, everyone knows everyone knows everyone's business, which creates the conservative dynamic in many ways. So what I found with conservatives that I've struggled with liberals on, and this is getting a little bit into the shift on politics.
That's great. Just go for it.
Oh, I love it. Here we go. Okay. So the shift with...
I couldn't hold you back if I wanted to. I don't.
So the interesting thing I found with conservatives is conservatives are very tight with their circle. It's very hard for them to let anyone into their circle. And when you're let in, though, and you're brought into your groupings, it doesn't matter what your political, your dynamics are, or anything along those lines, you are a part of that circle. My father was a blatant racist. That's not even a question. No ifs, ands, or buts. My brother wrote an article to his school. I was homeschooled my entire life. My brother ended up in high school. One of my brother's high school papers for junior year was about Black Confederates and how the South was right. That's the family I grew up in. But we were a small community of evangelicals in Utah, which meant that in our church, we had 2 Black families. My parents loved, cared, and cherished those Black families more than anyone, more than any of the other people, white people in the neighborhood that were Mormon, because they were a part of the connection. They would take care of my father and build into the connection and the relationships with it. While my father was going down to the Capitol in Utah protesting rights. This was because it's about the community. The community was more.
Those connections that are so strong that they can exist at a level over here. And in an abstract level, it's a different thing. But the actual day-to-day getting along, staying alive, the connections are that strong.
It's what I found when my mom died. So my family kicked me out of the house when I was 17. But we've had this really on and off relationship throughout my adult life. When I came out as an atheist, they were able to recognize that, or as agnostic, they were able to recognize that as, oh, you're just losing, you're struggling with your faith. You'll come back. But when I came out as trans, they cut us off completely. And they separated us completely from the relationship. We can talk about how that changes the dynamic.
Now, didn't you mention that when we spoke before, that some of those people still connect with you to see how you're doing?
And that's what I'm about to talk about.
Oh, sorry.
So you're getting. I love this. I love this. Woo! We're going to do this. Okay. So what is very interesting, again, we're talking about this conservative circle that, again, right, very tight to let people in. Very much you have to follow our set of rules, policies, and procedures. You must hold to our belief system, but we will still connect with you and protect you, even if you're the odd duckling, right? It doesn't matter if you've had an affair. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're a part of the inner circle, if you're part of the circle, you are well taken care of. My parents kicked me out, but when my mom died, my liberal friends, I had just a couple of them check in on me. Many of the liberal groups, political movements, and organizations I was with did not once check on me, did not once see how I was doing, did not once verify that I was all right and handling my mom's loss all right. Where, on the exact opposite side, the conservatives, my conservative family, checked in on me. My parents did not. My dad was still dealing with grief and everything along those lines. But the neighborhood, my Aunt Barb, Carolyn, Marilyn, they checked in on me. They checked to make sure that I had food, that I had a safe way to get to the funeral. They checked in on the whole 9 yards. They even told me directly when I got there, I will never use your pronouns. I will never refer to you anything but Justin, but I will always make sure that you're taken care of. And that is a huge dynamic shift. When you think about conservatives as these hateful, spiteful, wanting to push out LGBT individuals and hate and hurt them, and that isn't all true. They are definitely the wolves, right? Yeah. But it's an inverse in the equation. So we just talked about rural having very small amount of connections and frames, right? Now you go into the city and you have all this stuff. And I think that ends up building us because we have all this connection. We get this fascination with how many connections we can make, how many people we can connect on with, how many things, because we're in the city, we have lights, cameras, action, everything's blasting all over the place, right?
It was everywhere.
It's all over the place.
You can't swing a dead cat without hitting it.
You can't hit someone, right? And because of that, we develop a fascination of quick on-off connections with people. We don't have those tight. Conservatives are hard for bringing people in. Liberals are very loose and willing to accept anyone and everyone. Conservatives are very hard to let go. Liberals are very easy to let them go.
And this on the conservative side shows so much, and we talk a lot about the brain and the connections that are made. The more times those connections are repeated, the more they then also connect with other things, especially if the other world is very proscribed. It's very written out, so it is written, so you will do it, kind of a thing. That gets burned into a brain really heavily. It's very strong, and challenging that, which is why when I think of you, I think of bravery to be able to challenge such really deeply held things. And that's how it's very, very difficult to get, like Antonia Scatton says, it's hard to get through to a real solid conservative, because in many ways their brains just are simply not wired for that kind of interaction, or that thing. That changing of perspective is something that in some cases, religiously especially, they are told, no, you don't do that. You can't change your perspective. This is the way it is.
And that's why it was so important for David to touch base with me back in Idaho. What David did was he connected with me in a very connected human connection perspective, right? He addressed me as a human being and connected with me at that point. And when he shifted my perspective, it was through the human connection of consistent, reliable connection, right? And it shifted my perspective, because why would someone that didn't follow my worldview, which wasn't a part of my inner circle, which wasn't a part of my build frame and everything like that, why would they hold on to it? And I think it is also important, like we have to acknowledge, right, when you're dealing with conservatives and in circles, right, when you're dealing with these things, there's things and there's beliefs that you hold so tightly as true that you can then use those against other individuals. My parents held the LGBT belief. They believed that all LGBT people were pedophiles. They were going to go to hell. They were horrific people. So as soon as I came out as trans, they had to do what was best for them. And it's the reason why my partner and I were so scared of our family and everything like that finding out, because they had made threats against LGBT community. They had made violent threats against people in the community. And so to come out meant that we could run our risk. We don't share our address. None of my family knows anything but a P.O. box. We will never share our address out into the world because of that, because it's dangerous. But on the inverse side of that, there is a level of connection in the humanity from a conservative side that I don't find in liberal circles at all. And
not in even a little tiny bit.
Well, it's interesting. So the younger,
all these people care about a lot of different things.
No, I know. I'm so glad to have them all. And I wanted to make sure I was trying to also address some of your questions as I'm talking. And I did want to reach back up to one from Nick and Diane Rouse. What is the martyrdom complex? And I think that hits a lot into my story. And I'll try and be very quick with it. But there's a reason there's a tattoo on my arm that has alive. This A right here is the scarlet letter A.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when I was a kid and struggling, when we talk about what the martyrdom complex is, you always see that everyone else is out to get you. Right now, I feel more free and human than I have ever felt in my entire life. I love life. I'm finally able to connect with people. I'm able to love on people and show kindness and be there with people in ways that I've never been able to before. But as a kid, as a 20-year-old, I could travel anywhere in the nation, but I believed that everyone was out to get me. Obsessed about like Christmas cup issues from Starbucks, right? Obsessed about that they're trying to destroy my faith. They're trying to destroy my religion. Deeply admired into martyrdom dialogues. My name is, my dead name, I was named after, my parents named me after Justin Martyr because they wanted me to go to the mission field and die a martyr's death. And so it built it into the whole complex, right? And the difference now is because I've been able to come alive, because I've been able to see that the world is so much more than my view, right? I'm able to see that I have areas that I'm wrong on. Holy fuck. I'm sorry. Holy, yeah, I'm wrong about things. And it shifts my worldview to be able to find freedom in that ability. And so that's what the martyrdom complex means.
The question for me, what comes first? Are our brains wired tighter, which then leads us to embrace conservative values? Or do our conservative values wire our brains in a tighter way? Tighter is an interesting word. In the, pardon me, I've also got.
Can we say yes and yes?
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what's going on. The culture on the right and also in the rural areas, there are very good parts of this, which is making those connections and having those rules and being able to do that. Again, that as you grow up and you experience this, all of that gets wired into your brain. It's an actual physical, literally physical process that happens. And so if you go to church every day, which you did, and
3 times a week.
Three times a week. And Sundays?
Yeah, oh yes.
And you're told the same thing over and over and over, your brain will just wire itself in to have stronger connections to those ideas. And if we can connect with these very conservative small towns by appealing, this is the obligation thing, okay. But yeah, anyway, that's kind of what, and would it be opposite be the case for progressives? It's not, the brain works the same way for us as it does for conservatives. Yeah. It's what we put in, it's garbage in, but in this case, ideologies in, ideologies out. And if we are, this is why, if as you message, you use our worldview, our values, our way of our perspectives on things, and you repeat this over and over. And if we're all repeating it to all of our multiple groups that we're part of, if you're in the metro, or to our local communities, especially people well, if you're doing that, you're building brain cells in people that allows them to then have the opportunity to see things from a different perspective. Eventually, this is what strategic messaging is about and what not something liberals do. If we do this enough and long enough, then people will naturally, without even knowing it, think of things in our worldview. People used to, even the conservatives. There were conservatives who were socially liberal and fiscally conservative. They were all over the place. So it's not impossible, but we need to bring people. Those people cared about the people. They wanted people to succeed. They wanted people to do well. They didn't want people to starve. They maybe didn't like taxes as much, but they would vote for mental health care and things. And that, we can get back to that, but that takes us doing our job to make the kind of messages that get repeated and that give people that opportunity. It's something we don't do on a long-term level, on a strategic level.
But it's lost if you just use the tools we have in place right now. So here's the problem with the model. The model works when you deal with individual one-on-one connection, right? The model works when you deal with a one-on-one connection. The biggest problem is we no longer deal with a one-on-one connection. And this is why, like when we talk about liberal spaces, right? And I'm going to kind of jump in and out of this topic a bit, but in liberal spaces, how do we connect and we build drive? Well, if you came of age after 2000, so we know that if we look at 2000, 2001 is when broadband really hit, right? So I was born in 82, and I'm 40. Holy crap! And
I'm 68,
which is why I'm actually getting more involved in things now. Yeah, but so I came of age right around when broadband hit, and it's a shift of paradigm and shift of perspective. We understand before that our levels of nodes, and now we're talking, instead of connections with humans, we're talking about connections in our brains and the ways we filter news, as well as connections with people, was scarce. Our models for building media and understanding of what we believe was built on a small amount of data, right? So you had your newscaster, you had the person down the street, you had the person you talked to at the gas station, you might have that one person that emailed you because they were so techie at the time, right?
Or printed them out and mailed them to you.
Yeah, there you go. You had this very few amount of people that you connected with. You built your facts about the world on that, even though they might have been wrong. The facts you'd be able to find consistency and eventuality within that small level of fact, right? When broadband hit, it flipped. We went from a model of scarcity to a model of abundance. And our brains are not wired for a model of abundance. Our brains are wired for scarcity. If you understand like tribal dynamics within, and I apologize, this is going to get into, if you get into, apologies, my voice is getting this is sometimes what happens. I get going and my brain goes faster than my mouth, or my mouth goes faster than my brain. So you get into dynamics with what we know about humans in how we connect with large groups. Let's say apes, and this is where I was trying to go with it, will not grow a size of grouping over 150 apes total. Typically, you will not see a group over 100, mostly below 70. You might have a very proverbially strong ape that can control a group up to 125 and up, but it's never really much more than that. You have very small amount of connections when you get into it. We as humans have some of the same dynamic. We love to have very small amount of connections and political intrigue with a small group of people. What we've been able to use to break that is the software that we put on the hardware, which is your memes, not your genes, your memes, the memes of spiritual belief, your memes about that I believe in this God and this person believes in this God, or we believe in democracy, or we believe in capitalism. We believe in these things that aren't really real. These are memes that allow us to then interface with larger groups of people, which allow us to grow from 150 to 5 million and have people of disparate beliefs and systems, but being able to hold into these philosophies of belief and understanding, right? But our model has always been on the small paradigm. When we move to the internet now flooding our systems, we're getting an immense amount of detail, an immense amount of facts constantly thrown at us, which overwhelms our sensors in a way that we then have to move into a filter model. We then are able to manually choose the elements that we hold to and put to fit within our worldview. So if you're using the messaging of the internet, if you're using social media, if you're using these things, I'm not saying those are wrong. I'm saying that those are absolutely necessary and needed because they're part of the dynamic, just like it's necessary and needed for flipping my dynamic for having someone like Dave, who was very kind and sweet to me, or someone like R.N. Ra, who called me an idiot, right? Those dynamics shift the model of the method and the methodology of what we're sharing. But the thing that changes people is how do you differ your worldview in a way that doesn't follow the same mode? Right now, all political sides are focusing the same focus in the same language. Doesn't matter how great your messaging is. Yes, messaging is very, very important. But how are you able to relate that to the individual? And how are you able to connect that to the individual in a way that it actually makes dynamic change in the individual's life? And if you're doing it just online, it's just going to get filtered out for the most part.
It's difficult.
And what I've found, and this is the difference in the ages, when we talk about the difference between those who came before 2000 and those who came after 2000, we've had an ability to, my kids are even better than I am. Holy crap. I've watched my kids filter. They know how to filter and separate the data. They're able to really quickly go, okay, here's this, and this, and now we separate it. Now, sometimes their worldview gets really shifted by the stuff that's on them, but they are shifting.
So, so that's interesting because we talk so much about rural and metro. We talk about conservative and liberal, but really young people who I don't think we have any, yes. All of you are very young. Yes, I can see that.
Absolutely.
So you know what we're talking about. I don't because I'm old. There's a different dynamic that needs to happen when communicating with younger people because their brains are literally different. They've been wired different because they have grown up with broadband, with the ability to connect to millions of people and have different communities. It's almost like the internet is metro. Working on a rural brain that we evolved with.
Correct.
But kids even now have it more because they get it. I mean, I go on Facebook maybe twice a year, because it's just not me. But for kids, they live on it. My kids live on the phone. And so are there any lessons in there about what you're talking about with nodes and with communities and the differences in terms of talking and getting through to younger people?
So what I found, and this is the difference that I've been dealing with more and more. Yes, kids are more online and more of us are. And we are dealing with our own level of mental issues and mental problems that come because of online media and online connection. This is definitely an entertaining device, right? What I found, though, is they value human connection in a way that I have not been able to find in the older group.
So an example or examples.
Yes, I love examples. Okay, so I just came from a wonderful conference. I won't give the name at this time. And it was a very interesting, it's a tipping point for the group that was at this conference. A large amount of them were older. A lot of them were 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s individuals. But there was a contingent of us that were under 40. And it was a very interesting dynamic of difference between those voices. This is a very secular group. This is a very intellectually minded group, right? We are all about why we are able to rationalize and understand that we believe the truth, right? And we use our head. And it was a very interesting dynamic that the older group could very quickly talk about all the facts, all the connections, all the areas that they had. And if you talked about community, they would talk about, oh yeah, I have my beer group, I have my golf group, I have this group, I have that group, and everything along those lines. The younger group was like, F all of that. I don't just want to know, I want to take that knowledge of rational thought and understanding, and I want to apply that stuff to my humanity, to understanding my heart, and I need it to connect with people. And it allows us to drive forward because we're now shifting the narrative again in the way that it's about human to human connection, human to human things. I don't know if I can connect with those who came of age before 2000. It's actually a struggle point for me. I really do struggle with it.
And I'm ancient.
I know, but it's something that I do struggle with because of the dynamic that there's a shift in my human connection is at a level when I deal with younger individuals that I want to actually connect and we actually share a bonded protection. A whole group of us are checking in on each other's cupboards. And what I mean by that is, do you have food to live? We're trying to figure out how do we take the conservative values that were so powerful for who I was as a kid, who I was in my 20s, those conservative values that drive and protect people in rural areas, and how do we apply those in liberal spaces? But that means that you have to be ready for your paradigm to break. It means that you have to be ready to realize that you might be wrong. That you might be wrong about conservatives. That you might be wrong about the younger generation. That you might be wrong about the people that are stepping forward. It might mean that you might have to realize that you might be practicing sophisticated supremacy. That liberals, and Malcolm X said this, that, I know the wolf. The wolf is out there to bite me. He bares his teeth. I can see those teeth. The conservative out there is ready to beat me to death. I can see that. But the liberal is that sly fox who smiles broadly with his teeth. And I know I'm just totally butchering the quote, by the way, and I apologize to anyone who knows the quote, but smiles broadly with his teeth. And offers protection and humble protection there for me. And when the wolf chases me, I run right into the mouth of the fox. What I found, and this is a struggle point, I have been hurt more by liberal spaces than I ever was by conservative spaces. Because I know what my father thought of me way before I ever came out. Way before I ever shifted my paradigm or my belief system, I knew that my father was going to condemn me to hell and separate from me. I knew I was going to lose that structure. I knew that if my uncle-in-law found out about it, he would come chasing after us with a gun. That was something both my wife and I knew. And that's why we had to separate and go into hiding. That was something that we knew was a possibility. What we didn't know is when we have joined liberal groups, that what would happen is we would get invited in. There would be these wonderful signs, protect trans people. There would be great connections about here we're going to be there for you. We're going to stand and we're going to vote for the right policies. And hell, we'll make sure that you have funding from the government. When what we really needed was someone to check to make sure that I was actually safe, that I knew that I had food in my cupboards, that I knew that I had familial connection, that someone was going to be there for me. I know neighborhoods where I live that have protect trans kids signs on their lawns that I would never be welcome in. And they're white, affluent, liberal spaces. And that's hard to hear. But it means that that is hard to hear, because it's difficult if you come in a liberal space and you come from a dialectic of that your belief is ethical. We're holding what's right and we're holding what's connected. Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. I will stand with you and I will fight for you and I will be there with you in liberal spaces. I will march beside you and I will stand up for the liberal spaces that I'm in, because you're the ones voting for policies that make my life safe here in Minnesota. 530 anti-trans bills went through the United States this year. 530. I have a map of states that I can no longer visit. I no longer can go to Florida. I'm going to a wedding. I have to travel through the United States. There are states that I cannot, I'm now going around because of their bathroom bills. Most of the states, it's now, I can't live there. And I'm worried about the future. Which again gets down to that martyrdom, right? Like I thought I was being martyred as a kid, like I was going to deal with this whole thing. I was so scared of everything. Hell, these people are now shutting down states, so I can't go there. And I feel more free now than I've ever felt in my entire life.
As they said when I was younger, you're not paranoid if people really are out to get you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not martyrdom. It's actual.
I apologize. I left that on a really hard note there. So you had a question, please hit me. Because I feel like I didn't give, I just dumped a humongous amount on these wonderful people and like accused them of something, but I'm not. I just want you to hear that.
But that's why I wanted to do this, because challenging, the way we think we formulated in our heads how to be a liberal, how to be allies and all of that. It may not be exactly the way that that's received by the people we claim to be allies of. And so then obviously the next question is, what can we do about that? Because I know these people, and everybody really wants to do right. And they're good moral people.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
They care about folks, that there are a lot of people, and yes, sometimes it gets spread thin. But what can we do? And before you get into it, let me say that this relates to it. When we message, we find the hardest thing to do, but many people, the most hard thing to do is to get away from the facts and logic, and in that space where I'm going to lay it all out in front of you in great detail with all the facts. Then I'm going to lead you through my reasoning so that you will obviously only be able to come to the same conclusion that I have. And so I have people that we've trained, not many, most of them get it, but some of them who still have a hard time getting out of that space and getting into what we tell them to do is using toddler logic, for example. Just keep asking why you care about this issue. Yeah. And whatever answer you come up with, say why again. And eventually you get down to a story about actual real people and why you care about the people. Mm-hmm. You don't care about climate change because 97% of the scientists agree. You care about climate change because you don't want your grandchildren to be, choking up smog like we're doing today with the Canadian wildfires. Yeah. But, that's why we really care. And so I don't know, maybe that's a segue into how we do this or not.
No, this is where I think that we've done a very good job of separating the difference. We've delineated the line between what is a conservative and what is a liberal, what is urban and what is rural. We've done a very good job of that. We've also done a very good job of delineating, separating groups. We set up identities of people within different realms of connections, and then we separate those people into those buckets. And this is where I said, like, I'm not here for safe space. I'm here for brave space. I'm here for connection with these people that are on this wonderful call. I'm really thankful for every one of you that are here, because what I want to do is I want to see how we move behind the identity and move into connection. The thing that conservatives have gotten, and it's the reason why they've been able to hold the movements as long as they have. Democrats are very tactical, very specific.
Where have you heard that before?
They're very good at getting the one issue solved, right? We're going to get this one issue passed
right now today for this election.
Republicans are very strategic. And the reason they're able to hold that strategic element is because of the human bond and the human connection. If you're only creating a small level of circle, a dynamic between how you connect and you tighten that circle together, you're able to hold that circle together and keep that moving together in line with each other. And thus, then over the years, you're able to keep that messaging flowing, keep growing with that messaging, and keep doing that. The problem, of course, and the reason why that's scary is because that seems very small. If you're liberal and you're used to building massive amounts of connections, because again, you're in an area with 100 people to, thousands and millions of people that you're connecting with all the time, you can burn bridges, it doesn't matter. You can separate your connections with them. You don't have the level of training to build long, hard, fast bonds that are weak. And what we're talking about here when we say weak bonds is you're going to build strong bonds with your family. You're going to build those because you long-term, fast, long connections with it. Weak bonds are going to be the person, the mailman, the post office, the person that you're connecting with on the side of the street, right? These are the people that you're trying to set up a relationship and check in on them. For us in liberal spaces, and this is what we're finding in the younger generation, it means that we have to actually be very deliberate and actively step in to connect with people for where they're at and know where they're at. So we're wanting to change messaging and actually bring conservatives to the table. Then what we have to do is we have to step into their spaces. We can't lob grenades at them. We can't hope that our messaging is going to get through. Yes, we know. You put broadband internet into a location anywhere in rural areas, it's going to shift the narrative, because what's happened is now this people are going to get a level of narrative that they haven't had previously, and they're going to be able to add that into their model. Yes, so 100%. Let's get broadband internet everywhere. But once you get that internet out there, once you get those established, the things that's going to shift people's narratives is how you show up, how you care about them, how you step into their lives and are willing to move closer to them even when they're scared. And so when we talk about how do we create brave space and how do we expand on it with what Melody just said, how do we do this? It isn't about, I'm not looking for an environment where it's all about, let's be very careful not to offend justice. Hell, I want human connection. Yes, it hurts when people get my gender wrong. It hurts deeply when people use just horrific phrases to me and call me things. But what matters to me more is what did they do afterwards? How did they step into my lives? Did they lob a bomb at me? Or did they step into my life and make sure that my family is safe? Did they make sure that they checked in on me? And that's what George has done. And so George, we're going to call George out here. George has done that. George has stepped in a way of checking in on my humanity. George asked me out for coffee. George didn't want to just have a chat and figure out stuff. George wanted to see how I was doing. And what that did is it fostered a level of connection. So allowed me to then reach out to George and check in on George. And then George reaches back to me. And then we start asking questions and we started talking. And then George is like, you know what? We need to have this dialogue on this thing. And so now we're here because George kept checking in on me. It allowed me to realize that George cared because George checked in. George stepped beyond it and made sure that everything was safe. And I know there's a lot more than that, but there's so much more that I don't feel like we can share because we've already hit 8:05 and I don't want to go much more.
Yeah, and maybe, do you want to open it up for questions?
I'm open for any questions. And by the way, y'all, there's no questions that it's not on the table. I'm open for any questions. I'm here for it. I'm here for brave space. So if you ask me a question, I might come back at you with a question or ask you for something, ask you to may respond a little bit strong. But please, let's work together. We're in a relationship together. I talk together and work together.
And for people who are a little new or this first time, we generally run the webinars and have our content be about an hour, and then have about a half an hour of chit chat. Sometimes the content goes over the hour mark, but you know, if you need to leave, we totally get it. But we want to keep it open usually, so to make sure that people have their questions answered. So anyway, go for it. And I think, Lisa, do you want people to, I guess Justin will go through some of the chat, but do you want people to just raise their hands or what?
Yeah, I think at this point we can, if you want to raise your hand and Justice can recognize you. Hello. Antonia has a question.
I don't actually know how to raise my hand emoji. I just know how to raise my hand.
You're great. Let's do this.
So, I mean, one of the things that I'm hearing, like I've actually done a lot of work in rural areas and like, I mean, all over the country. And I've seen that in some respects, people everywhere, like people in cities live in these neighborhoods that act just like small towns. It's kind of suburbia where things get detached more in that way. But I think a lot of what it has to do with, it's not that people don't have a lot of connections, because a lot of people, like, you know, huge connected families, neighborhoods. The block that I live on is incredibly connected in that way, in checking with, in all of that. But on the Democratic side, my observation has been that in the professionalization of the political industry, we have detached it from the community and given all of the power, and every decision is made by consultants in Washington. Whereas on the conservative side, they understand the power of those interpersonal connections. And so what I see is not that we don't have these personal connections, but that we don't engage, like in the conservative world, like you were talking about in your past history, the politics and the church, and it's all connected.
Oh yeah.
Those interpersonal relationships are being used to spread beliefs, political views, the world. There's no separation between the values of the church, the values of the community, and the values of the political system. Whereas on our side, there's this idea that like, oh, all of our politics is just logical, and so therefore we just give people facts, they'll understand everything, but we don't do, like our politics is so far above and out there and disconnected from us that we're not using our personal relationships to talk about what really matters to each other in this really, in that we don't really talk about our values. We just say, this is the best way to achieve said goal. We don't say this is morally right or morally wrong, because we don't talk about that kind of thing. So I think in some respect, we have a lot of these relationships, but our politics is divorced from that entire network that is there. Because the only, because we have two things. We have the consulting world that rains our politics down from above in the way of commercials. And then we have these activist groups that are, I think in many ways detached from the regular lives of most regular people, you know. And I mean, as an activist myself, I see that gap sometimes. Like people who are only doing politics all the time are kind of living on a different planet than kind of ordinary, nice kind of Democrats that just live and go about their lives. So I don't know, I'm piling a bunch of stuff on you here, but I'm
agreeing with you 100%. Ding, 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 ding. I snap when I agree. It's my thing. No, I agree 100%.
Like, how can we change, like, because I've studied how conservatives do politics, and I'm like, they understand the power of all of this interconnectedness and all these relationships. Why can't we have that? Why can't we do that ourselves? Why can't we, like, whenever I go somewhere new, I immediately go and introduce myself to the local Democrats, because those are likely to be my people, you know? And so, but I wish that like, rather than just going to a meeting once a month and arguing about bylaws, that we had much more going on, that we met for dinner once a week, or that we had more we have relationships, but we're not connecting those to our moral being, I guess, in a way. We're like separating those in some way.
I would say, and there's something to put with it, and we want to, Melody raised their hand as well.
Yeah.
So one of the things, if you followed like the Black Lives Matter movement, one of the things was that came out of Ferguson, and that was a very tight group of people. And the reason it was able to be so successful now is not because of social media, is not because of the vocal people that jumped onto it. They jumped onto it because it was already a successful movement. And it was a successful movement because a small group of people kept working on it over the years and did not let it die. They kept going. And that nature is the very nature of everything I did in the conservative communities I was in. I mean, the people I went to go paintballing with were the same people I went to church with, which were the same people that stood out on the sign with me while I gave my Tea Party talk, right? It's the same people. We were connected in every aspect of our connection, and we drew people into those nodes by sharing that relationship we had with them.
One thing I've noticed too is we tend to get enamored with the process, that the solution to everything we're doing is that we need to put every last minute of our activist time into accomplishing something, whether that's endorsing a candidate, going to the Capitol to do something. And I know here in Minnesota, I was associate chair and then chair of the 3rd Congressional District. Marge Hoffa, who's some of you know, was the chair, and we worked together, and we said, you know, we can't just do that. We have to do more than that. We have to have a community. Our CD would get together just to endorse a candidate for the House. And we said, instead of that, why don't we have people get together from across the congressional district, bring the Senate district chairs in and their people, and let's do stuff that's not politics. Let's have pizza. Let's bring, I mean, maybe it's politics. You bring in a speaker, but do this once a month. And a woman here picked up on it. My friend Carol Ware picked up on it, and she had 12 different groups going, and she brought in college professors. She brought in people who ran nonprofits. But you would go there and you drink beer and have a pizza and you learn something. But what was really happening is the people were becoming friends.
Yeah.
And they met Democrats who were active, and they weren't, but then they felt like they kind of were. And then when it came around election time, it was a much more of an easy lift for them to say, okay, I'll go door knock. I'm kind of scared, but I'll do it. And what we were doing is building community. CD3 in Minnesota is still at the top of voter contact and voter turnout, because I think we built a community and we had people having the human connection between each other outside of, or just tangent to, the political sphere we were in. So it wasn't just, okay, we only get together just to accomplish these goals, and when the meeting's over, everybody's glad as hell to get out of there and go home. You know, I don't know if that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was experiencing when 2016 happened. Because I've always been active, and I've always voted from 11th grade when I went to my first caucuses for extra credit for social studies. Mm-hmm. So I've been active, mildly active all the way through. But when 2016 happened and Trump got elected, it's like, I've got to do something. I need something. And I got involved in an activist group, but I just felt almost lost in that group because they were so much more rabid about everything is politics, everything, it just took over everything. And I liked being part of that energy, but at the same time, I almost felt alienated by it because I wasn't as into it as they were, and I didn't feel as connected. And I'm still connected to that group, but just more tangentially now, just because my life happens and other things are going on. But
So
it's
I
like
had something.
I want to keep that energy going, and I want to do something with it, but I haven't found the right spot, the right something.
Can I throw something at you, Melody? Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay. So this is something this is me asking some questions and kind of going back and forth. And because I hear what you have to say. And one of the things that I hear your experience, because your experience is something that a lot of people feel in a lot of different communities. Once a community is already going and very fully established, they have their perspective, especially their drive for politics and political perspective. What I would ask for leaders of communities is, what about your communities may possibly silence voices that join those communities? And so for you, you were facing an experience where trying to get active, they were so rabid about their enthusiasm and excitement, it was difficult for you to find a place that you felt in, right?
Right.
Yeah. And that can drive in, and you don't feel like connected and a part of that group, correct?
Yeah, because there's a definite disconnect where I don't fit in.
Yeah. And so that can create a situation where it's a mixture, right? And we're going to have that, right? We're going to always have people that are a little bit more on the fringes, a little bit more in those groups. But when we have connections with people, how do we make sure that we're bringing them in and including them in the process? And that's one of the things that I will say about the Democratic Party is we have a lot of policies. Every liberal group I've been in has had an immense amount of policies. One of the things when I was a pastor, we were writing all these documents, but it was like, oh yeah, the documents will come, but it's all right. We don't care what's in those. What really matters is the people. And when I came to liberal space, it was, oh, we have some people, but let's talk about our documents. It was a kind of an interesting.
There is something to that.
Yeah.
Well, no, and just a reminder, I believe there's a state central committee meeting coming up.
It created.
Sarah? Sorry.
But I work
Sarah.
in communications, and so I want to do something more with communications, and that's kind of how I connected to this group.
So Sarah had her hand
approach.
Well, I was going to
approach or reframe it.
And challenge me too, because I say a lot of wrong things.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Well, there are a lot of different things that were going on, but they all kind of rotate around each other. We talked about you specifically, Melody, found this group, but they were just a little too radicalized for you. But then, we talked about going to the party and that they're all focused on a particular job. As y'all can see by my name, I'm from Georgia. I'm one of the officers of the Democratic Party of Georgia. And my specific role is I oversee all the county committees throughout the state. And way back in the day, I was a county chair myself. And we had a hard time getting people to come and want to be involved in doing party stuff. But once we started with the social aspect of it, people will come and they'll continue to come. And then you do form this little community of people who want to be involved in that. And that's much easier when you have people who are friends and want to get together. Then you can say, well, guys, we can have pizza tomorrow. On the next day, we need to go knock on doors. And you can continue to just grow that community out by finding your people. And if it doesn't work with one activist group, because those typically are more issue-based than they are party-based, find another one or or make your own. Honestly, that's the easiest and best way to do it. That way you'll know you'll always fit in, right? And then there will be other people who want to be a part of it as well. It's a matter of tweaking things until it fits for you, but knowing that you're not the only one out there and there will always be someone that does agree with you. So I was just going with that.
And as I say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Look at what you guys did in Georgia. Everybody around the country knows what you guys did in Georgia. It's absolutely amazing stuff. And yeah, we have the opportunity to see Sarah here. It's a mover and a shaker in that whole movement.
And that's what we did. We built our network one county at a time, and then we connected our counties, and then it came from there. But we just make sure that our people are always feel heard, because we're a big state. We have 159 counties, so it's hard for everyone to connect. But once they do, they know they're not alone, and it's much easier to fight with your friends at your side.
Yeah, this work can be really emotionally demoralizing. It is hard work that we are doing. It's scary out there in a lot of this. And it is, you have to have that emotional support. And I think that, the more we can kind of, I think like work through, like, I think, one thing Melody was saying is looking for these political groups, and just gave me the idea, Sarah, that like, what if you go to the people who are already your friends and say, well, hey, we can do something together, like do the other way around. There's this group in outside of Richmond, Virginia, called the Liberal Women of Chesterfield County, that flipped to county blue in one cycle they were all young parents in the school system, and they organized, they did the parent school network. They organized they organized the whole county by, the boundaries of the grade school districts, because that's who all knew each other. So they grew from like 0 to 3,000 people in a year by going through all the relationships they already had and the people they already had some kind of a connection with. And bam, did they do some amazing work. But yeah, like, I think what I'm hearing is sort of like, it's got to go out. It can't just be this calculated, we have a political task at hand that involves, A, B, C, D, and it has to be building relationships based on a shared concern for what's happening to people. And those relationships have to go beyond, we have a task to do how are you doing? Like, is the climate shit keeping you up at night? Are you okay? That's what we're all going through. And you don't have the strength to do all this political work if you are not being emotionally supported by people in this community.
And this is what you and I have talked about before, and it is changing the culture on the Democratic side. Yes, we need to learn how to frame things, but this is a cultural shift that includes that part of making a community out of this, giving, there's got to be something people can take out of this. There's no paycheck here in this work. But if you're doing stuff, and I think Betsy, Betsy, you said to Melody, I have all new friends since 2016. We find those places where we find community, and where we're happy to work alongside others, and then you get those actually great political experiences where we've experienced great wins and devastating losses, and it's very emotional. But we have that opportunity to have that binding. And so when we talk everything about messaging here and framing, but that's why we always weave into what we're talking about, how we build that community and how we get together and do things.
It's more than just, not getting a paycheck. I mean, for some of us, this actually matters really deeply.
Yeah.
Like, so, yes, like, I'm a big proponent for climate change. I will push and push forward on the climate change things. But right now, my siblings are dying. That's a reality of the world we now live in. And we've opened up our house for people to move to Minnesota and live with us from other states as they're trying to find places to live, because they're being driven from their states. This is a situation for them that is very difficult. And so this is a very interesting paradigm. So when we talk about trying to bring minority voices in to our movements and include them, it's very easy with the groups that we currently have. It's very easy to build relationships with the people that you're already in community with and then drive forward. But how do you make sure that you're including voices that may not be a part of your group? And how do you then activate those minority voices in a way that they can join in? Well, number one, you can't make them a political pawn. They know when they're being tokenized. I know when I'm being tokenized in a room. That's not even a question. I know who gets my gender right on purpose or because they love me. Right? It's very obvious to me. And what matters, though, is how do we step into people's lives and we connect with them and we bring them in. If you bring them in because you cared about them and you showed them, hey, not only am I voting for you, but I'm also checking on your pantry. I'm making sure that we're including your voice in the conversations. Hey, you're under 45. Maybe you don't have babysitting. Let's make sure that we take care of your, we find a babysitter for you so you can be a part of our board meetings. Hey, maybe your voice, you're scared that your voice will be silenced. Hey, let's make sure that we're amplifying your voice as part of the conversation. What can we do to make sure our bylaws are not excluding people from our groups? What do we make sure that we're setting our groups up in such a manner that we're including people, not just for the sake of being inclusive and diverse and being, and we're going to use the conservative word, woke, right? But because we actually effing care about them. People know when you care about them and when you're just using. I don't know how else to say it.
I have a question. I don't think a lot of people in our community, like we know these laws are being passed, but we're so trying to overturn the laws. I don't think a lot of people have thought, holy crap, there's a lot of people who have to move, who need help relocating and need jobs and such. Is there some kind of network or project or group or something that is, I mean, I know that there's groups that deal with, immigrant relocation and refugee, is there some kind of a network or support group that people can be like, I will help you find an apartment or navigate getting into the school system or that kind of stuff? Because I think there are a lot of people who would be willing to help with things like that, but might not even have occurred to them that was something needed,
Yeah. And I think that's part of the conversation. So yes, in Minnesota, there's groups I've talked with, like Out Front has had some conversations around those lines. There's different smaller groups that are doing a lot more for housing in Minnesota. I know there's a group, I'm trying to remember their name. I don't have it in front of me right now, down in Florida that's working very hard. I'm a part of the Pride Business Council for Target. And we're having conversations. How do you do things? How do you have these conversations? And I think that everyone, and again, right, like whether Target will listen to me or not, I'm sure going to be advocating for LGBT community team members, right? Because I've got to take care of people wherever they're at, right? I hope Target listens to me, but that's a different issue altogether. But yeah, I mean, there are groups out there that are trying. The damage is done. And so my question to you is, have you checked in on some of these members in the community, right? Yes, Missouri passed a horrific law that made it very outlawed transgender care for adults, right? But then it was overturned in the court system. And I'm well aware that many of these laws that are being passed are going to get overturned in the court system. They're absolutely unconstitutional. They're not justified. With that said, these laws were not passed knowing that they will stand. These laws were passed to scare people out of their cities and to scare us away and to hurt us. That was directly an attack against us. And so the question is, are people checking in? Do people know if your cabinets are full? And that's what, as a trans community, we're stepping in, we're trying to do that. And that goes for other communities as well that have been marginalized and their voices have been minimalized for years and years and years and years. They built support networks for themselves within their own communities because they've learned that they can't trust other communities. And that's something that we have to address, and we have to step forward. And that's hard for us because it means that we have to also admit sometimes that we might be wrong and we might have been the ones hurting them with our policies.
I just want to take a moment and say thanks. I mean, when we had coffee, what did I say when it was over? I wish I had my phone on because this would have made a great podcast.
I'm just glad I got to meet some really cool people.
These are cool people.
And
these people.
I hope you all heard what I was saying is calling you in, because I really believe that. I believe it's going to take each and every one of you. And I want to have a relationship and a connection with all of y'all, because that's what we're here for. We're here to move forward. Let's move forward.
Let's do it. All right.
So I think we're going to wrap it up. This was a great conversation. And thank you so much, Justice, for coming here and talking.
Thank you for joining us.
And sharing.
Yeah, that was great.
And you'll come back again.
Sure.
That wasn't a question.
Okay.
connectionslab.org